everyone, we're the Good Doctors. I'm Dr. Hinson.
I'm Dr. Donnelly.
And welcome to 2019.
Yay for 2019! Yay!
For those of you that have been following us along on our YouTube, or for those that are just joining us, we often like to take some time to critically analyze some popular culture, TV shows, books, media, documentaries, whatever.
Broadway.
Broadway sometimes. Last year we did seasons of The Handmaid's Tale and The Crown, and we did a blog series on Big Little Lies. But at the start of the year, we don't really have any new shows to talk about yet. So we're going to start by doing a series of videos analyzing and talking about some of our favorite Netflix original content. So, welcome to today's episode where we talk about the ever-depressing and yet fascinating documentary series, The Keepers.
Yeah, we figured what better way to start off 2019 than with the murder of a nun and the uncovering of a sex scandal.
In the Catholic Church.
Specifically the Archdiocese of Baltimore.
Yes. So, a real quick summary for what this documentary is about. If you don't know, there's 7 parts.
That came out in like 2017. So if you're like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah. It was not a new release.
It wasn't a new release last year.
So May of 2017, it is a 7-part documentary about the uncovering and discovering of the murder of Sister Kathy Sesnick, who taught English and drama at Archbishop Keough High School in Baltimore, Maryland. And her murder takes place in 1969.
1969, and then she was discovered in late 1969. Her body was discovered in January 1970.
So the documentary involves 2 former students of Sister Kathy.
It kicks off with
Gemma Hoskins and Abby Fitzgerald Schaub, who both believe that Father Anthony Joseph Maskell was involved somehow, allegedly involved, we have to say, in Kathy's disappearance and murder. And the show becomes about a whole heck of a lot more very, very quickly.
Yeah.
So lots of students start to come forward, particularly in the 90s. 2 students come forward and accuse Father Maskell of abuse. Mm-hmm. And so they are also involved in the documentary and talking about how these connected cases of disappearances. There was another disappearance of Joyce Malecki, very similar circumstances and around the same time, and the same location, physical location of Sister Kathy. So there's investigations on into her disappearance and murder. So it's an interconnected web of lies and deceit and abuse and murder.
So when you start the documentary,
What a recommendation.
Yeah. So when you start the documentary, you really think it's going to be like a true crime thing about this disappearance of this beloved nun. Like she was, it sounds like, the teacher we all wish we had. Like she was just wonderful.
Everybody has not everybody, but a lot of people have a favorite teacher. So imagine like this happened to your favorite teacher.
Your favorite teacher. And she just disappeared. Yeah. She wasn't teaching at Keough anymore when she disappeared, but Baltimore is small enough, and in this section of Baltimore is small enough that it was shocking. A couple key things to understand about why this is so significant to the city of Baltimore. So first of all, religion scholar hat.
Pastor hat, Donnelly.
The Archdiocese of Baltimore is the oldest Catholic diocese in the United States. Even though if you talk about Catholic cities, I would imagine people are going to think of Boston, Chicago, Philadelphia, kind of New York, the stereotypical places that Irish and Italian people ended up. Baltimore is actually the oldest, and that's to do with the charter for Maryland and how that all happened. But anyway, so Baltimore is the oldest. I won't go nuts in that. But around the time that these murders took place, Baltimore was the highest rate of active Catholic parishioners in the country. Over 60% of the parish of Baltimore, which if you're looking at the city of Baltimore, is the city of Baltimore and then a little bit out into the counties, 60% were active mass participants, and not just like they went sometimes, like they went every day. The Catholic schools were the biggest schools, and Father Maskell himself was very active and important in the Catholic hootenanny of Baltimore. Hierarchy. He was the chaplain for the county police, the state police, and the Maryland National Guard at the same time as being on faculty at Archbishop Keough. Father Maskell also has a history of being moved around. We should say Father Maskell passed away in 2001 before any criminal charges were brought. He was under a civil lawsuit by 2 of the women that Aaron said came forward in the 90s, but criminal charges were never filed because he passed in 2001. But in his career, he was moved a lot. Including to the place, after Keogh, he went to one more school, and then from there, he went to the place where they send priests that get in trouble. So it was not a secret to the Archdiocese of Baltimore that he was a problem.
No.
And it was probably not a secret that he was specifically a systemic abusive presence. The Archdiocese, we should say, since the Keepers have come out, has apologized. Now,
they still haven't released his records.
They won't release his records.
Which is one of the cruxes for the documentarians for Gemma and Abby, is they're trying to at least get information. Like, they're trying to solve this case, and they keep going to the Archdiocese saying, you have records on this man. We are trying to find out what happened to Sister Kathy, and the Archdiocese is like, no.
No, not so much.
No, we're not telling you.
We're not telling you. As a result of the documentary, before I forget, this whole thing started as Justice for Sister Kathy Sesnick and Joyce Malecki, the other murder.
Yes.
That was a Facebook group that Gemma and Abby started to kind of gather anyone who ever knew Sister Kathy and kind of figure it out. Once the Netflix series launched, that Facebook group was shut down because it had become a bit of a safe space for survivors to talk about their stories, and they figured that all of us nosy Nellies should not be privy to such things, which is true.
Yeah.
So they put up an official Facebook group. It's very active still to this day, almost 2 years after the release of it. And as a result of the documentary, the only significant legal change that has happened is that the statute of limitations for reporting childhood sexual abuse in the state of Maryland has been extended until the victim is 38 years of age. This is one of the problems perpetually around the country with convicting childhood sex offenders, is that the statute of limitations tends to be something like 5 years after the crime, 10 years after the crime, crap like that.
And victims and survivors often, if they ever disclose, don't disclose until much later in life.
Much later in life. So especially childhood sex survivors. So we wanted to talk about this for a couple reasons.
Yes, why did we love this documentary?
First of all, I have a sick fascination with things that are terrible and depressing. So
her favorite thing in the world is true crime. So
I do. Like,
she loves
my favorite murder.
She watched it before I did, and she was like, OMG, if you have some downtime. And
the emotional bandwidth.
And the emotional bandwidth. So I don't know at what point in 2018 I thought I had enough emotional bandwidth to watch this, but I did. And it's gripping. It's absolutely gripping.
It's a really well done documentary.
Yeah.
So it's not, like, there is so much true crime that is absolute cack, but this isn't. So one. And two, statistically, most true crime victims are women. Most true crime perpetrators are men, just across the board. And yet we tend to not have a lot of media that centers the story of survivors because there aren't that many survivors in this genre. This centers the testimony of the women.
Yes.
And the documentarian Ryan White is a big believer in just holding a camera on someone's face and making you sit there with them while they cry. And that may sound terrible and depressing, and it is those things, but guess what? We are of the belief that the greatest thing that we as fellow citizens of the planet can offer survivors is our time. So if for nothing else, it's going to take about 7 hours of your life. It's not going anywhere because Netflix isn't going anywhere, so you can take your time.
I don't think it's going to be one of those things that Netflix takes off anytime soon.
Anytime soon.
No. We
would highly encourage you to hold witness for these women. It is not, and we use the word alleged. The only real alleged part is his participation in Kathy's murder. It is pretty proven that he abused these women.
And men.
And men. The girls, especially once we got to Keogh, were prostituted out to some of his friends.
Yeah, there was a lot. I mean, and that's one of the things, right? You go into this documentary thinking it's about one thing. And it becomes about so many things. And I think one of the biggest takeaways as we were talking about why we wanted to add this to our list of recommendations is it shows you the impact that abuse, systemic abuse has, and the web of it, the widespread web of people that are impacted. So you learn from this, it's not just the victims and survivors, which is in a lot of cases, particularly involving the Catholic Church, a lot of people.
Yeah.
But it's the people who knew them, it's the police officers who were allegedly involved, in potentially covering up what happened or protecting Father Maskell. It's the people who, find these anybody who engages with somebody who is involved in this, it becomes so widespread. And so I think that gives you the sense of it's not just the victims and survivors that were impacted by this. And it's not just the abusers that are involved. And it takes a lot. As we learn, every time there is an institutional cover-up, we talked about Larry Nassar last year, and we'll include a link to our hot take on that hot mess in the link below, in the show notes below. But we learned that it takes a lot of people to protect abusers. And that's one of the things that this documentary brings home as well.
So if you're looking to expand your knowledge base this year, if you're looking to consume things that challenge you, if you're looking to potentially just kind of increase strategic knowledge, there are people that do reading challenges and things like that, we would encourage you to add this to your learning this year, and hold witness, especially for Jean, who you'll meet, and especially for Jean, and other women who we're still learning about, who are just starting, who are still just coming forward. We should also say that one of the connections is that at one point when Father Maskell was getting sued, he went to Wexford in Ireland in the early 2000s, early 90s, and they're still doing investigations in Ireland. So it's possible that his abuse was not just limited to the diocese, the Archdiocese of Baltimore, but was instead international. So we will keep you posted if there's ever any developments in this case, because we are certainly following it closely. So in the meantime, I'm Dr. Donnelly.
And I'm Dr. Hinson.
And we're the Good Doctors of Abbey Research, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.